The way that I like to work with influencers and creators is, well, first of all, they're the experts. Right now, the way I think about influencer marketing overall is that it really is an integral piece of a 360 marketing campaign, but also can lead a campaign. One of my favorite parts of working in this industry is building out those relationships. Networking, taking calls when people reach out to you. I always take update calls and coffee chats and things like that. I want to ensure we each are aware of upcoming priorities or even opportunities. We're all kind of taking inspiration constantly from culture. That's how a lot of these campaigns end up being built out to begin with. Understand the landscape, but know it will always change.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Creator Ops Podcast. I'm your host, Thomas Schreiber. The goal of this podcast is to educate you on becoming a great operator in the creator economy. On today's episode, I talk with Juliann Kane, who is a senior marketer at Klarna, working on influencer, social, and content. Klarna is a buy now, pay later financial technology service that offers a variety of payment options for online and in-store purchases. During our conversation, we talk through how Klarna combines FinTech products with culture and sports, balancing trends and brand identity, how to brief creators and give them the right amount of creative freedom, building direct relationships with creators versus utilizing agencies, structuring influencer marketing teams, and lastly, the importance of having a reactive budget. And now for my conversation with senior marketer at Klarna, Juliann Kane. Traditionally, FinTech products can be a bit boring, as we talked about. Will you explain Klarna's approach to taking a product like buy now, pay later and integrating it into sports, fashion, culture to make it interesting, but also extremely relevant?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, of course, speaking about a financial product isn't the most exciting thing, especially when trying to make that come to life through social. In sports specifically, I've really had an opportunity with my team to develop some strong long-term relationships with athlete ambassadors and partner with local artists and designers. The community around sports is really strong, which of course is similar to social niches in general. So for me, it's really important to understand how we can add value and show up for customers, but also like create something interesting and culturally relevant. I think, right now, especially with like the speed of trends across social media, there's kind of a balance between like jumping on every trend or being a part of every cultural moment, and then really having more of a proactive approach in certain niches where you can add value, where you can partner on like a long-term basis with athletes and or whoever in different spaces, and really think about like the use cases that are interesting. So that might be like a game day fit with an athlete, or showing fans what influencers and athletes in that community do to get ready or to take care of their kids or other things they like. One athlete we work with actually has a cookbook. So we've done like a lot of behind the scenes work, really showing what that looks like to her fans, like how she feels herself as an athlete, but also her interest in cooking and where that stems from. And you can really have your own perspective in the way that you show up in different niches. Of course, like it's really fun to work in fashion and like do a get ready with me. And we have so many merchants that are a part of Klarna. So we have this really awesome opportunity to melt those together and like help someone get ready for an event, invest in a new piece and show like what that process looks like for them or how they show up in that piece and the process behind it in terms of like shopping for it and paying for it. But as much as like we all want to be there for every cultural trend, there's a healthy balance between being reactive to a lot of trends and also like being proactive in spaces where you really might find an organic fit.
And how do you guys usually balance, like how do you think about what trend to jump on versus, hey, maybe we should kind of hold off on this? What does that balance look like? Because obviously you can get a little shiny object syndrome where you're trying to do, everything. How do you think about it?
I think, like, first of all, is there alignment? Like, does it even make sense for us to be a part of this trend? Part of it, too, is bandwidth, right? Like, some teams are set up where they have, like, that reactive team or what is now termed as, like, a cultural marketing person who is able to really look into social listening insights or be very proactive about the way that they identify trends. And, of course, like, if you're just scrolling your FYP or on Instagram or what have you, you might come across those trends in the same way. But I think there should be a brand fit, or you should have a really cool creative approach that someone else might not have, which kind of like surprises customers as to how you may have even ended up being a part of this trend. I think, there's been some potentially fun examples for us, but also I think there's the balance of, does it make sense to show up in that space? Like, do we like have a voice, like even like being a part of it? I think there's some current trends recently that I think anyone could be a part of, which makes the conversation even more fun. Being demure and mindful, that's definitely something that anyone could kind of apply to their marketing efforts. But the concept of kind of always chasing trends is definitely going to be more harmful at the end than having that kind of balance between like what really resonates with your audience, what voice you should have in certain communities versus, just chasing trends like repeatedly. So
As you work with influencers, obviously giving them creative freedom is really important. You shared a couple great examples of past partnerships with influencers like Bowman Martinez and Erica Priscilla. And within their ads, people are commenting about how good the actual ad itself is, which I think is always obviously a good sign. People are saying you literally make the best ads, or you're literally the only person who makes, an ad fun. Will you explain how you typically brief influencers to make sure they're fully aligned, but also giving them the creative freedom to be themselves?
yeah, absolutely. I mean, in those examples specifically, they were so much fun to work with. And that campaign, we really had the opportunity to lean into personality specific influencers. And that was really the brief in a lot of ways. So the way that I like to work with influencers and creators is, well, first of all, they're the experts. Like they know what their audience likes. They know what works well. They have, existing series sometimes that you might be able to already kind of plug into in a really organic way. And so when I think about briefing influencers, we're thinking strategically, what is the campaign and the structure? But a lot of times I'm tailoring those briefs to specific influencers. Of course, I'm in a unique position to be directly managing those communications versus maybe a larger scale, like agency, always on type brief. But in a lot of these scenarios, I'm able to source and vet those influencers and really think about what content series do they have? How do they align with our brand already? Like, how could we create a really cool partnership together? And then in my initial conversations, just like initial conversations being like, are you interested in working with us? Like, this is the content I think that would resonate really well. These are our goals. The key messaging is always really important, but we always want influencers and talent to think about that in their own voice. So there's always the caveat of this is the messaging, but like bring your own voice to it. Like, how would you say this to your audience? There's, the element of having a creative overview up front. And that might be, we actually have a creative conversation, like a meeting where we touch base on what their thoughts are, like what might work and what not. And I might be going over some product education in those conversations as well, just so like if I bring something up that really sparks for them and they think would resonate really well with the type of content they create or could really help their audience, that might be something they want to bring into it. And I like to think that it really is a partnership in the sense that like we have this creative conversation or this creative brief, and ideally most kind of feedback comes through right then. Sometimes no feedback comes through, and like that's like it's perfect. Like that's why we're working together. You know what I mean? And right kind of in the upfront, adding that creative overview deliverable, I think has mitigated a lot of like the back and forth of potential edits that a lot of people have frustrations with brands. There's like a lot of like, oh, you can't say this or that, or you can't do this or that. But if you're really kind of setting those expectations in the beginning and having some sort of like approval process in the beginning, it allows the creative freedom, but also allows you to have a smoother partnership overall. So I think, again, it's not everyone has the opportunity to like have conversations or, go through every single creative overview in the upfront. But I think it's really important, especially when you think about building out partnerships and ensuring that it really is a two-way street. Like this is an industry of relationships and people, like working with people. It's not like as much as we're, companies, like a company and an influencer in a lot of ways now is a business, they still are people who are just like managing their content and their life and everything else. So
And when it comes to those relationships, typically companies use influencer agencies, but you've developed a ton of direct relationships with lots of management companies or even directly. What is your strategy for that? Because obviously, like you said, the whole industry is built on relationships. It's about who you know. And if you don't have to utilize influencer agencies, it can be a little bit easier. But building those relationships does take time.
Yeah, I mean, I've been in the industry for over 10 years at this point, so I have a little bit of a time advantage, I'll say, just working across social with talent and influencers overall. But to me, like one of my favorite parts of working in this industry is building out those relationships. And I think like spending a lot of time networking and taking calls when people reach out to you. Of course, like you don't always have time for every call, but especially when I have like maybe a little bit more flexibility in my schedule, I really try to like take the time to take those initial calls. I always take like update calls and coffee chats and things like that if I've already worked with management and influencers as well, because I want to ensure, we each are aware of like upcoming priorities or even opportunities. Like there's so many ways that brands can plug into something that's going on in an influencer's life at any given time. They're buying a house or they're going back to school or whatever it might be. And maybe that like really fits with an existing campaign you're building out, or there are always on opportunities to kind of tap them long term and think about like those different points and how it applies back to your brand. And like for me, just like consistently keeping those relationships going. I mean, one of my best friends is someone I hired 3 years ago. We like hit it off and that's it. Shout out to her. She knows who she is. But I think like like that's what makes it so fun. Like to be in this industry to begin with is like maintaining those relationships and like just remembering that we are all just people and we're just we're kind of making it up in some ways. Like this is such a new industry. We're trying to understand like the best way to measure and like look at how it like is integrated into marketing and businesses overall, like how people are allocating budget towards projects like this. So I think, of course, there's a lot of strategy and structure to it, but
Totally.
at the forefront of it being such a massive,
Yeah.
channel and industry overall.
And how do you typically like creators or influencers to reach out to you? I know there's a lot of different ways to do it, but is it as simple as a creator reaching out saying, hey, here's a couple of ideas I've got, and then you're saying, yes, no, maybe let's chat about it? How do you prefer a creator or just a management team to reach out?
I mean, I definitely prefer reach out that's slightly more tailored, just because if I don't have a sense of like where there might already be a fit, it's harder for me to, just take the call because I might be working on a number of things. Of course, as much as I would like to, like sometimes it's hard to schedule everyone who reaches out. So if someone or a management influencer, whoever reaches out, a lot of times I like just love any sort of update. If it's like, oh, like it was so fun when we worked together on this campaign. These are like some things going on right now. Or if we haven't worked together, like these are some of the talent who've really expressed that they want to work with you. These are some things that are going on, but they also love X, Y, and Z thing. Like this could be a great partnership, or they're going on a trip and like, you could help be the payment behind like all their stays and all or whatever in the example of Klarna where I work now. And previously, like the same thing, like if someone expressed they're like huge fans and like I used to work at Audible. So if like they listened to audiobooks all the time while they were doing certain activities or what have you, like that's a really great way to kind of plug in there. People reach out to me on LinkedIn, email. I've gotten Instagram DMs. So I don't think there's like a right way to do it. It's just kind of like the approach in terms of like, just having some sort of idea behind it.
So you guys have been doing a lot of work with professional sports leagues, but specifically in the women's sports league category. Will you explain some of the campaigns that you've done and maybe just the thought process behind executing those?
Yeah, definitely. So I guess more recently, we've been in the women's sports space for about 3 years or more now. We have like a really great partnership with a team in the space, and I've worked with female athletes on a long-term basis for almost 3 years now, 3 seasons, which has been really fun because there's so many ways that we're able to work with them. And it's just like it's fun to be in this space right now, especially with like such an emphasis on women's sports, which should have always been there, of course, but is just like gaining more and more momentum. So we more recently conducted a study with Sports Innovation Lab to understand the merch gap between men and women's sports teams. Like I said, we've been partnering with teams and athletes for a while now, and we really wanted to provide more value and understand like how we can help serve fans of those sports as a partner and also just as fans ourselves. And the merch gap is just a really unique place for us as a payments provider because we were able to understand what fans were looking for and also partner with designers in the space and Olympic athletes and athletes across the board who are really passionate about bridging that gap, and which is something that we're really passionate about because when you're out there looking for merch for your favorite team and it just doesn't exist, or it's like in the wrong cut because it's, made for just not made for you, or like you really want like a hat or the jersey of one of your favorite players, but it just doesn't exist like that. The number of people who are out there looking for that and aren't able to make that purchase because it's not there for them is such a missed opportunity in so many ways. So many people that we've worked with have been also incredibly passionate about this. We're so excited to like don the merch that we made with Together, which it says this is a movement, not a moment. And we want to continue to like build this out, fill more merch spaces where we can partner with more merchants who are doing the same thing and like really like live by this is a movement, not a moment, which I think is really fun. And the way that my team works is we're a really integrated marketing team. So we get to really think about like a campaign like this and how does talent work in this campaign versus partnerships and paid media and what have you, and PR especially. And we really come together to kind of like bridge the gap as well as in the way that we're showing up in a 360 campaign in a really organic way. I mean, the passion that we have as a team, I think, really comes out and
Totally.
through in the way that this campaign came to life. Not to mention, like me and my coworkers are like constantly resharing everyone's content.
Yeah.
So it's just a really natural fit for us as a team, but also us as a brand, and aligns with like our goals and being able to be the go-to shopping and payments provider for female athlete fans.
What's your advice to, speaking of like teams and, influencer partnership teams and how those are structured, what's your advice to a company that's wanting to build out their team and figure out, all right, who's going to lead it? Who's going to support that leader? What would you say is the best place to start and maybe structure that team with a leader and then a couple, junior people to support?
I mean, right now, the way I think about influencer marketing overall is that it really is like an integral piece of a 360 marketing campaign, but also can lead a campaign. So, I mean, you're seeing in the market right now a lot of brands working with, like Alex Earl and Cyrus and all these great influencers, and they're being featured in out of home and in commercials and in their paid media campaigns. And they're not thinking just social first, which of course there's nothing wrong with like it being a social campaign, but I think there's just so many communities you're able to tap into. So you can, niche down and work with your like paid media team and have their favorite influencer all over like out of home in a certain city because like they have a lot of like fans and influence in that area. And so all of that to say that I think when anyone thinks about building out a team, you really want to consider, be it that, the leaders of that team are work very cross-functionally with like maybe a marketing, like a B2C marketing team, and then a PR team or what have you. And then there's that influencer and social team that's really built out, but is able to kind of also help the thinking beyond influencer or beyond social, really. I don't know if there's like a perfect way that it's built out. I love being on a really integrated team. I think you could build a team from an integrated marketing team and then have the kind of like those leads in each specific part of marketing lead a number of more junior team members who can like, help really build out robust programs. So you can have someone on like affiliate and someone who has who's in charge of like an ambassador program or always on, and then someone who touches cultural marketing, who is like constantly like watching social trends, being able to fill in the team really quickly so that everyone can activate and really also have that reactive budget.
Yeah.
I don't want to say like there's like one strict way or one right way, but I think the more cross-functionally a team is built out or a team is empowered to work, the better the outcome, whatever that outcome may be, or whatever goals you're trying to hit. So,
will you talk about, you mentioned something there called a reactive budget. Will you just explain what that is for people that may not know?
Yeah. So a reactive budget, again, this is kind of, I keep bringing up this cultural marketing aspect, which I think if you were to scroll through LinkedIn, you would notice there's a number of roles now that are cultural marketing and influence, or cultural marketing and something. And that's really to be able to react, as in the name, react to moments, be it online or like during, what was the MTV Awards last night, during a major awards or something like that. If there's a moment that you can tap into or talent that you can tap into because they like announced they're releasing an album or they showed up in a certain way and you could really like tap into that moment, or any of these viral moments on social, like, the looking for a man in finance, as an example, that could be a really great opportunity for someone to hire her to create, a jingle or something like that. So there's just like, I also saw some people talking about that on LinkedIn, so I don't want to take full credit for that. But, we're all kind of taking inspiration constantly from culture. And that's how a lot of these campaigns end up being built out to begin with. So having that reactive budget, I think, really allows you to be flexible in terms of like where you show up. Maybe you don't normally show up in music or something, but there's a musician who is like talking about your brand nonstop. Like, on their own, they're just like, oh, we just always use this or always do this. And like, you want to be there. So of course, it's great that they're doing it organically, but social media notices when they've been talking about it and you decide to actually like make that pairing come to life or that partnership come to life. Same with influencers. Like, so many times I've seen brands where, there's some really cool influencers out there who actually pitch PR ideas and different brand campaign ideas. And there have been some really cool brands who've taken those influencers up on those ideas. Instead of, taking the idea themselves, they've actually worked directly with that influencer to have those campaigns come to life. And their audience notices, they're really tapping a community. It's like such an organic fit in so many ways. And, you're really able to target new potential customers in that way if you're looking at it from a brand side, but you're also making a really, for lack of a better word, authentic connection with that influencer and that audience. And you're also showing that you kind of find the value in a lot of these creative concepts, because everyone is putting their creativity out there. That is like, there is a lot of work happening, and the industry is changing more and more towards, that thinking as well.
Yeah. And every brand, I feel like, they're trying to find the organic perfect match, right? Like, that's what everyone is chasing, is like, everyone from this particular industry sees that this is like the perfect fit, but they're few and far between because not everything can work. And when it's forced, you can tell, and everybody can tell, right off the bat. That's what makes the influencers and the creators, when there is perfect alignment, is so powerful.
That's what's really cool when people reach out to me, especially, and they're like, we love your brand. Like, we use it all the time. Like, it would be so natural for us to talk about it. And we have this big trip or project or something coming up. And like, that's a dream for most people, just to have those opportunities, if you have the budget, obviously, to react to some of those opportunities. So
Totally. And even like seeing creators reach out to a brand saying, hey, I've already talked about your stuff, 2 or 3 or 4 times. Like, here's actual proof of it. Let's do something more formal, whether you started as an affiliate and then you're kind of transitioning to maybe more paid opportunities. Let's do a bigger campaign. Here's what it could look like. We could do a fully integrated thing across YouTube and email and social. Like, there's a lot of opportunities there. And again, you're making it easier for someone like you to say yes and, go from there.
Especially when you think about emerging platforms or newer social platform, like Substack is really what comes to mind. Like, I'm now on a constant lookout for people who have a Substack. I just want to figure out how to like work with more people who have Substacks, because I think there's just so many cool opportunities there. And yeah, so to your point, I think if you're already using it and you happen to be also like, you have a following somewhere else that I might not notice.
Yeah.
If I'm not a part of like your community, that's also cool. So
yeah, and the newsletter game especially too. I feel like even if it's not a giant newsletter, right? If you've got a very specific niche, whether it's finance or tech or marketing, whatever it is, of really loyal readers and very in-depth content, I mean, there's a lot to be said there as far as partnership, opportunities.
Yeah.
For your team, when it comes to tracking performance, what's the most important metric for you when you're working with an influencer or creator, let's say on, an integrated campaign there?
It really depends on the goals, right, in terms of metrics. So if I'm thinking of something that's more like awareness driven, there's some ways I've been looking at things more recently. I use Tagger as a platform, and you can actually see the EMV on campaigns, which is really interesting. I mean, you can make some sort of correlation to like, ROI or what have you. Of course, it's different in a lot of ways, but EMV for awareness, reach, and engagements. Engagements to me are just important because that's also what the platform is also identifying as an important metric. But beyond just that, like, if the audience of an influencer are really engaged and are willing to comment or share or what have you, they're more likely to make another action. So that's a good signifier that like there may be more opportunities to work together, lower funnel, like consideration or a conversion. I also really like view rate and average view duration, especially on TikTok and YouTube and what have you. You're really able to understand how long people are staying engaged and if they're even getting to the message that's, in the content itself. Search queries is great. When you think about social SEO, which to me is really important because if someone is, trying to understand how your product works better or get reviews on a topic or what have you, it's really nice to see if that's like how they're getting to that content itself or what they're searching for in general, like around your product. So yeah, I mean, there's not one perfect metric. I think it really depends on goals. If it's awareness, if it's more education based, if it's conversion driving, it could be click throughs and more affiliate type metrics.
And what is EMV?
Estimated media value.
Will you explain that?
Yeah, so it's traditionally, and I don't want to misspeak, but it's traditionally something used, a measurement used in PR. And that's really just to understand like the value of course, like the number of people they're reaching across sources, because that's a lot harder to track, and it's an earned media tool as well. So, say I spend like 90K on I don't know why that's the number I chose, but 90K on an influencer campaign. And then the EMV was like 90,000
Sure.
as the estimated media value. You could say like you could like give some sort of comparison to what your return was there, your spend versus what it's saying the actual value was at the end. It's just, and I think it's really great when you think about like having full teams understand like the impact of influencer marketing, if it's not something so cut and dry as like, how did this convert or what were the sales from this?
Yeah.
How many people signed up or something like that. So
On the same point, it's like if you spend 90,000, but the estimated media value was 200,000, or it just maybe it went viral. Then just like you're saying, you can take it back to your team and say, hey, this was a bet that we took. We spent 90. Really, this was probably worth, we executed it so well. We did the partnership so well that it was probably worth, a couple 100,000.
Right, exactly. And that's just a good use of spend in that case. So,
yeah. When it comes to long-term partnerships, I think that's something that people like you and me and other folks in the creator and influencer space are pushing brands to think more about, not just doing one-off stuff and then being like, oh, it flopped, let's, move on to the next one. How do you think about long-term partnerships, and how do you think those are evolving with brands and their relationships with, influencers and creators?
Yeah, I mean, a couple things, like even in like previous roles, I've always kind of thought about always on creator programs. And I think that's something that brands are increasingly adding. It's like, if you think of like not new at all, but like Sephora Squad or what have you, there are these kind of long-term ongoing relationships with creators of all sizes. And that might be more affiliate based, or that could be a long-term ambassadorship, which is some of the longer-term partnerships that I work on happen to be like ambassadorships, where we are, working with, in this particular situation, like athletes for multiple seasons or a year to 3 years or what have you, and really building upon that. And I think it's such a benefit because the talent that you're working with really have the opportunity to kind of be a part of your brand and your community in a way that someone else doing a one-off might not. And that could come to life in so many ways. Like, you could build out a program where you are legitimately inviting those influencers to come to your office. They don't have to come, but come to your office and do, an education program around like, how can they be the best source of information for your brand? Because you don't want, like, no one should be promoting something that they don't believe in or what have you. But it is, I think there are some really unique ways that can come to life. And what I like to try to do in a lot of partnerships too is understand if we can start something off where at a minimum we're able to make a couple of pieces of content where that's possible over like 3 months or what have you. Also their audience being able to see that content over and over again, there's more of a frequency. They're able to understand what the brand is or what the product is. And then, if not able to work in that capacity, there are so many influencers that I think about as like a friendly of the brand. So like every time we have a campaign, maybe they're not like a full-time partner with us, but I've hired them 2, 3, 4, 5 times, you know what I mean, for different campaigns, because they have so many interests in so many ways that they're able to bring different messaging to life. And like, they genuinely now understand the brand too. And it's always like a benefit, especially if you want to be reactive, is like, if you have like a group of people that you're able to be like, hey, like, I saw you were like interested in this too. Like, I love making content with you. Is this something you would want to, work with us on again? And I think that's like, it's been such an amazing way to partner with people and just continue to build out that relationship. And then maybe at some point, like, hopefully build out a program where you bring them in more full time.
Yeah.
It's not available to everyone in that capacity. So that's where I think being able to tap people over and over again, at least, and like have that ongoing relationship, going back to like the networking and spending time understanding like, what potential opportunities are in working together, I think really kind of comes to life, because now I know that someone is like throwing a holiday party and, maybe there's an opportunity there, or like hosting a dinner or doing something, or doing something. So,
yeah. And more brands, I feel like, are starting to realize, just like you're saying, like, hey, let's start off with like at least 3, spots or 3 posts or whatever it is, so that we can understand, is there alignment? Is there fit? Are we working well together? Is the audience liking the content?
yeah.
I think that's becoming more and more of a thing where the creators and the managers aren't having to push so hard to be like, hey, doing a one-off really just isn't the best for your brand. Like, we need to try this at least 3 times, because one post can underperform, it can overperform.
Yeah.
Politics could take over for the day.
100%.
Something crazy could happen, right? There's so many opportunities there.
Yeah. I mean, it was, I think I worked with someone recently, and my coworker was like, "Oh my gosh, you worked with on a different team." Was like, "Oh my gosh, we worked with this influencer. I love them. The algorithm just like naturally pushed it to me, and like I was so excited to see it. It did so well." And it's like, yeah, that's like the goal. Like that, even my coworkers who maybe don't follow those influencers are getting that content because that's how it's getting pushed out and what have you. But that doesn't always happen because, to your point, like something in the news might take over that day, or something else goes viral, and like that's the only sound taking over that day. So, I mean, I feel like sometimes I'm scrolling and it's like same, like over and over again, and you're never gonna find that, even if that content was like
Amazing.
a great piece of content, maybe it'll come back to life or like have legs later on. I've worked with some influencers who around like a team, and when that team like went to the playoffs, all of a sudden that content like popped off again.
Posted.
Yeah, and I was like, yes.
It took some time.
Moment, yeah.
It finally, and even I feel like that happens a lot with YouTube as well, where it's like a video might not pop for, gosh, could be a month or a couple months, and then all of a sudden, 6 months later, even sometimes a year later, the video just starts to go crazy, and you're like, all right, it wasn't what we thought it was in the first
2001.
Yeah.
21.
Yeah.
I'm really going back in time, but 2021. So, yeah.
But still, I mean, there are, with creators with such big catalogs, specifically on YouTube, stuff can catch, and you're just like, yeah, it was 5 years ago, but that video is still relevant, especially if it's an evergreen type of creator.
Yeah.
That's where I think brands do have to play a little bit that long game of, hey, this certain creator does have a track record of these videos performing really well 5, 6 months, a year later, your brand is still going to be in there. And that's going to be worth something.
Yeah. And I don't think it's always fair to just like write a creator off for future campaigns just because like one video didn't perform, because there are so many other factors that inform that as well. So
yeah. And especially if it's a viral moment or a political thing,
yeah,
it could take a week for pretty much social media to get kind of cleansed, right? To like get everything out and like, all right, back to some sort of normalcy. And then, the regular content can perform. As more brands kind of continue to invest in creators and influencers, there's more, positions like yours coming up, whether it's at FinTech, whether it's in healthcare, whether it's e-com, direct to consumer. What advice do you have for those who are just starting out in a role like yours?
I mean, first of all, understand the landscape, but know it will always change. I think the constant to this being in this industry is change. And that might be an algorithm change, that might be a new platform, that might be, people are always talking about now, like brands' performance across social versus creators. Like brands just aren't seeing the same performance. Not everyone, there are definitely standouts, but no, most brands aren't seeing the same performance that creators are seeing, and so the landscape has kind of shifted away from a brand focused D2C environment that we once had. So I think really understanding that change and understanding those platforms as they come up, and then always having conversations with people in the community, and that could be like networking, that could be just taking a call. This industry is an industry of community. And so I think, for example, like in the same way that social media is community focused, like we all kind of benefit from being a part of this community and like learning from other campaigns and mistakes or successes or what have you. I mean, there's so much inspiration that's you can take from other brands in terms of just like strategically. It's not like copying a campaign, but like, oh, that's so cool that they decided to respond to this comment as like a full new piece of content. Or, there's a lot of brands right now responding to feedback in the makeup industry and like really listening to their customers, and like everyone notices. You can kind of look at the landscape, make sure you're also reading like the newsletters and Substacks. I love Substacks. There's so many Substacks out there that are covering the news on the creator economy. So I would just say like, just stay up to date, talk to people, at the end of the day, like, there's kind of those memes about the marketing girly versus the marketing girly, which is like data versus the creativity. I think it really is a melding of the two. And like the more you can understand both the creative and the insights of that creative, I think the stronger you can be as like a member of a team or in your role or starting a business, whatever it might be. Like, I think that's a really big asset to have is being really like thoughtful in a creative approach, but also understanding what the impact of that creative is.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Creator Ops Podcast. If you're interested in chatting more about the creator economy, send me a message on LinkedIn or email me at hello@creatoropsmedia.com.